Good evening, friends. Welcome to the 79th edition of the PG Track program of Delhi CSI. And we are into a wonderful new series of congenital heart disease and rheumatic heart disease and clinical approach to various cardiac disorders, which are very much exam oriented. And today we are going to talk about hemodynamic interpretations of congenital heart disease. Actually, no exam and no practice is complete unless know the basics of hemodynamics, how to interpret the data, and how to meticulously come to a logical and a wonderful diagnosis. So on this journey today, we have a pleasure of having respected Dr. Hari Krishnan sir, who's a professor of cardiology at Sri Chitra. It's always a pleasure to listen to her. He's a world-renowned heart failure specialist, also one of the chief persons who is organizing regularly the conferences, especially running heart failure programs and also PG programs on heart failure, various case series. A very must attend, about which sir will definitely mention during this particular course. On this journey, I also have along with sir, Dr. Sumodh Kurian, who is my colleague, professor of cardiology from JEEPAN, and Dr. Girish MP, who is also professor of cardiology from JEEPAN. And thank you, Intas, for providing us this platform. Without wasting time, I would request sir to please start the lecture. In case you have any questions, comments, and clarifications, please feel free to write to us in the chat box. We'll be happy to take all the questions at the end. If you want, and if you miss any particular lecture, this will be available on a YouTube channel, which you can easily subscribe. If you want any particular clarifications further, you can also mail to us on pgtrackcsi.delhibranch@gmail.com. Sir, a very hearty welcome to you on behalf of Delhi CSI, the PG Track program. It's always lovely and pleasure to hear you and to have you on board on this, sir. Please, over to you, sir.
Can you see my screen?
Perfect, sir.
Thank you, Mohit, and it's very dynamic people in Delhi CSI is conducting 79th program for the postgraduates. I think it is wonderful to associate with you. So Mohit had asked me to discuss the basics of hemodynamics and then the interpretation in congenital heart disease. Am I audible?
Very clearly and wonderful, sir.
So when most of the exams, you will be given at least few tracings for to analyze. So that is very important. So my first tip is that don't see the tracing and just jump into a diagnosis. Most of the time you will be wrong. So what the examiner wants to you, go systematically. That is very important. So what as an examiner, as all the panelists who are regular examiners, we all like to discuss the tracing. We expect you to say what is the type of tracing, whether it is a pullback or a simultaneous. What are the type of waveforms, which I will discuss subsequently. How to interpret, how you are interpreting the data. You discuss the data and finally come to the diagnosis. The diagnosis, I have put it in small fonts because a diagnosis is not that important. If you tell all the things correctly and make a minor mistake in the diagnosis, or the diagnosis is totally wrong also, it will not reduce your marks. So that is very important. Don't see a tracing, say that this is mitral stenosis, this is coarctation. You don't jump. So do go systematically. That is very important. This will give you time to think also. So that is very important. So very basics you should know. I was surprised to see in some of the exams when we ask what is systole, people make mistakes in the final exam. So that has to be very clear. So peak of the R wave to the end of the T wave, that is systole. Rest of it is diastole. Very clear things you should understand. You should not make any mistakes on that. And there are three types of waveforms. The atrial waveform, ventricular waveform, and arterial waveform. Atrial waveform, the left atrium, right atrium, and the pulmonary capillary wedge. These are the atrial waveforms. So what is the peculiarity of the atrial waveform? It will have 2 waves per cardiac cycle. The major waves, we will discuss it subsequently. 2 major waves per cardiac cycle. The other 2, the ventricular and arterial, will have a single wave per cardiac cycle. And how will you differentiate between ventricular and arterial? The ventricular usually touches the 0. To make it very simple, there are exceptions we will discuss subsequently. And arterial usually will not touch the 0. So that is how in a simple way to understand. And always just see the scale. It will be written on the side. Most of the exam tracings will be Pakka tracings. They will be very classic tracings only examiners will bring. So all the details will be there. The ECG will be there. Always concentrate on the ECGs. It will give significant clues to your diagnosis. The scale you should know. Most of the cath labs will have two forms of scales. Either it will be 20, 40 or 100, or it will be 25, 50 or 100. Sometimes it can go to 200 or 400. So the scale you should know. If there are two tracings, as you see in this tracing, it is a pullback from the LV to the LA, and also simultaneously you have the aortic tracing running continuously. So you have that tracing, but here both are 200. But sometimes one of the tracing can be different. For example, one can be 200, the other can be 100. So make sure that you make the correct diagnosis, correct interpretation, and you get a mean pressure. The mean is calculated. It's an electronic mean calculated by the machine. The machine calculates the total. It will take the total waveforms and calculate the electronic mean. That will be written in the brackets in the machine, the screen. And also the speed of recording. Very, very important. Because this is the same tracing recorded at 25 millimeters, 50 millimeters, and 100 millimeters. So don't jump and say that if it is a tracing, sometimes we take trace, for example, if you do a Valsalva, we take tracings at 15 millimeter speed, 15 on 5, or 10 millimeter speed to see the whole thing in a single frame, single screen. So don't say that this is VT. Don't jump. You see it will be written there. It will be written there. So you have to make sure that what is the speed of recording. Always say the ECG. That is the clue. The ECG is, see the ECG, speed of the ECG. That will give you the clue. How to record the pressure tracings ideally? This will be asked. You can get the question in the theory exam also. We know the pressure wave is a periodic fluctuation in force per unit area. So most cath lab transducers will have a damped natural frequency of 60 to 70 hertz, and up to 60 to up to 120 beats per minute. You will have all the finer events or waves picked up. Beyond that, the accuracy of picking the finer events are low. So the up to 120, you can get all the correct information. So what is a transducer? What is a transducer? Modern transducers utilize a displaceable silicon sensing diaphragm. That is what you commonly use. That is what the technician comes and connects near that three-way, which is kept on a pole. And it works on the principle of Wheatstone bridge. I hope you remember your physics days in +2 and all, where there is a quadrangular or what is it, trapezoid shaped 4 resistors connected and all. Forget about that. You remember that the principle is based on a Wheatstone bridge, where the resistance get altered when the diaphragm moves. So commonly what we use is the fluid-filled systems. Fluid-filled systems. So the pressure comes. This is connected to the patient's vascular system or the ventricle through the catheter, and then it comes to a sensor. And sensor it processes, and the output is displayed on the screen. So the fluid-filled system, the advantage is that they are cheap, disposable, simple to calibrate, etc. Disadvantage is that it is prone to noise, reduced fidelity, etc. Then we have an alternative is a solid state systems, solid state pressure measurement systems. So here the pressure is directly, the sensor is directly in the vascular chamber where it measures directly. For example, one example is the FFR wire, where you get the solid state pressure system, where you directly measure the pressure at that particular point. The advantage is that it is more accurate, measure the pressure at the source, less prone to noise artifacts. There is no need to flush or remove air bubbles because you are directly getting the pressure. Disadvantage is that it's expensive, it is hard to maintain, and calibration of the equipment is always difficult. So if you are asked about a solid state pressure system, you can see the Miller pressure catheter. It's an example of a solid state. I don't think it is commonly used except in that FFR system where you directly measure the pressures. So for any measurement, you should have a standard or the zero. That is what is called a phlebostatic axis. Phlebostatic axis. It is at the fourth intercostal space and mid-chest, regardless of head elevation. Fourth intercostal space, mid-chest, regardless of head elevation. This you should very clearly understand. So the calibration is what you ask the technician to zero. So what the technician is actually doing? It is establishing the atmospheric pressure as zero. What is the atmospheric pressure? 760 millimeters of mercury or 76 centimeters of water. That is kept as zero. The stopcock, which is that exact position where the three-way or the stopcock is opening to the atmosphere. That is the level at which the zeroing happens. It is the point where the three-way opens to the atmosphere when you are zeroing. That is the point. That point should be at the level of the phlebostatic axis. That is why they use a scale and all to measure the middle of the right atrium or the phlebostatic axis connected to the sensor. The sensor should be at the same level as the phlebostatic axis. So it should be correctly referenced. Otherwise, your pressure will be varying. So this is an example of when the pressure source is below, you will have a pressure is underestimated. When the pressure is the source is above the sensor or the sensor is below, you will get an excess pressure because of the weight of the fluid. So this is how you should calibrate it correctly. The three-way stopcock should be at the level of the phlebostatic axis, which is the fourth intercostal space mid-chest. So this is the point you should understand. How to record optimal pressure tracings? That is, these things you should by heart and remember. As already said, zero the transducer at the level of the stopcock, mid-chest, fourth intercostal space. Shorter, larger catheters are better. For example, if you have a 7 French catheter, better than a 4 French. Optimal length of the tubing. Sometimes you may be asked, it is said that it is 4 feet. And a rigid catheter is better. For example, a braided catheter. Braided means there is a metal mesh covering the catheter, which is more stronger. A rigid is better than the very soft catheters. Optimal, the system should be optimally damped. You should remove all the air bubbles. Whenever you see a damping of the pressure, for example, your aortic tracing doesn't have all the waves like the dicrotic knots and all, you always flush the system and also the transducer sometimes. So that will give a very good recordings. And if you have 2 transducers, both should be zeroed at the same level. For example, if you are doing a balloon mitral valvotomy, you have left atrium and LVED. So it should be at the same level. Otherwise, your values may be erroneous. And you should always calibrate the transducers using a mercury reference ideally at 25, 50, and 100. Every month you should do ideally. And always flush the catheter with saline before measuring. For example, if you have a contrast in the system, you measure the pressure because of the high fluid viscosity, it can damp the pressure. It will give a falsely low systolic pressure and a high diastolic pressure. And patient should be, this is very, very important. You should always remember, patient should be adequately hydrated. For example, if you are doing a balloon mitral, patient is coming at 7 o'clock in the night, in the evening. The patient is fasting since morning. You do measure the right atrial mean, it is 0 or -1. So your LA pressure will be totally erroneous. So whenever you see this, you give some fluid, your LA mean pre was 7. After you given so much fluid, when you check the post BME pressure, it will be 10 or 12, higher than the basal. So you will be confused. So what you should do is, if the RA mean is very low, infuse 300 or 400 ml of the fluid till you can give non-heparinase saline in the case of a balloon mitral. So because you are going to do septal puncture, you infuse the fluid, make sure that the RA mean is near normal, at least 4 or 5 millimeters, so that you will get the adequate or the correct hemodynamic measurement. Then there is something called a square wave test. I don't think it is used, but you should know what is the square wave test. So square wave test is, you should have a high pressure fluid system connected to the three-way. So previously every cath lab used to have that. what you do is like when if you have seen rotablator procedures being done, you know that there is a high pressure saline system being connected. So like that, a system is connected, and just open the three-way to that, and it will generate a square wave. And ideally, after a square wave, the transducer system is good. It should produce two after waves, like, as you see here. There's a two after waves. One will be 50% of the rest. So only two after waves should be there. It should not be less than 2 or more than 2. If it is less than 2, it is an over damped tracing. There is no, you can see, there is no only very, very minuscule wave. This is the ideal, which is seen here. This is the over damped one, and under damped you will have multiple waves. So this is also, you will get very high, pseudo high pressures. So this is the square wave test. If somebody asks you what is a square wave test, you should know. 2 waves should be there. If it is less than 2, it is over damped. If it is more than 2, it is under damped. So this is example of an under damped waveform. Under damped waveform, what you get is overestimation of the systolic pressure and underestimation of the diastolic pressure. Your wave will be much taller and deeper than the original wave. So that is under damped waveform. Causes are a long stiff tubing, increased vascular resistance, etc. Over damped waveform, usually you see in the cath labs. There is underestimation of the systolic pressure, overestimation of the diastolic pressure, used to air bubbles most commonly, compliant tubing, catheter kings, blood clots, etc. So most of these things are prone, you can always correct by doing a proper adjustment of the system. That is very, very important. Next is when will you measure the pressure? For example, in a pulmonary capillary wedge, if you know, it will continuously vary depending upon the respiration. So you should measure at the end expiration. At the end expiration. And some of the cath lab systems have a respiratory measurement also in the system. That will be ideal. Otherwise, it will be difficult to measure. But you should take the end expiratory reading to have the exact value. That is what is recommended. How are the usual pressure tracings recorded? That is the question. So either it is a pullback. So this is a pullback from pulmonary artery to right ventricle. Here you can see the pulmonary artery pressure is how much? This is around 70 by around 40. RV pressure is also around 60. There is no gradient between pulmonary artery and RV. So this is a situation of a pulmonary arterial hypertension. Sometimes, no, very rarely, you can get a push-in tracing also. This is a Swan-Ganz catheter going, when you float it from the RA, it goes to the RV, goes to the PA, and goes to the pulmonary capillary wedge. Rarely you can get a push-in tracing or a floating tracing like this. But most commonly, you will get a tracing, either it is a pullback tracing or a simultaneous tracing where you have two transducers. This is an example of a LV and aorta. What is LV pressure is around 140. Aortic pressure is around 8. There is a gradient difference in pressures between LV and aorta, around 60 millimeters. So there is a LV outflow tract obstruction. What type of LV outflow tract obstruction we will discuss subsequently. So this is how you interpret it. When I get this tracing, you should tell the examiner that this is a LV and aorta, because it is written there. Most of the time it will be written there. LV pressure is 140, aortic pressure is 80, and there is a 60 millimeter pressure gradient indicating a LV outflow tract gradient. Don't jump and say the aortic stenosis. So always be careful in just don't jump into diagnosis, just discuss step by step. Common sources of error, you should know: improper zeroing, air bubbles, clots or kinks in the system, loose connections, very, very important. And when your pressure is inadvertently dropping, you always check your connection at your end. Defective transducers, mechanical ventilators, and that is very, very important. Mechanical ventilators. For example, your anesthetist, the patient is under anesthesia, and the anesthetist are given a PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure of, for example, 5 millimeters. So all your pressures will be elevated by 5 millimeters. You should always understand. So you should adjust your measurements accordingly. Then there are certain artifacts in the pressure tracings. So the catheter whip artifact. So mostly seen by, for example, in balloon catheters, tipped catheters, because of the acceleration of the fluid within the catheter, from the rapid catheter motion. For example, if the flotation catheter is near the pulmonary valve, and due to the movement of the balloon catheter, you will get some artifacts. So it can make a 10 millimeter difference. So more common in balloon-filled pulmonary artery catheters. Avoid extraneous loops. For example, sometimes you have to make 1 or 2 loops to enter into the pulmonary artery. So if you avoid that, if you straighten those loops, this artifact may come down. And the deflating the balloon also will help, because that will reduce the movement of the catheter. Catheter entrapment artifact. For example, your catheter is in a very hypertrophied left ventricle. Your pressure will be the intramural pressure, which is falsely high, rather than the intracavitary pressure. This is more common in with end-hole catheters. So you change over to side-hole catheters, and that will help. This happens in LV hypertrophy, it's like severe LVH, HOCM, RV apex, when the RV is hypertrophied. Here you can get catheter entrapment artifact. Then there is something called end pressure artifact. This is also a problem of the end-hole catheters. For end pressure artifact, there are 2 types, upstream and downstream. Upstream is that, for example, your radial catheter. Radial catheter is facing the flow from above downwards. So your tip of the catheter is faced with a pressure from the diametrically opposite side. So what it produces a falsely high pressure. The other type is the downstream pressure, flow in the same direction. For example, your catheter is facing the pulmonary artery, for example, RVOT, your catheter is there, and the flow is in the direction of the RV. So there will be a negative suction there, and it will show a falsely low pressure. So this is the end pressure artifact. Some of these things you should know. So there are 2 concepts like damping and ventricularization. You should know what is the difference. Those is most commonly seen during coronary catheterization. Both are very different, but have the same impact on the coronary flow. Both can be dangerous if not recognized in time. Both can produce ischemia, and if it is prolonged, it can lead to arrhythmias like VT or VF. So damping is characterized with abrupt decline in the mean coronary pressure with a narrow pulse pressure. Damping is a narrow pulse pressure and a delayed upstroke and a downstroke. So this happens when there's a mismatch between the catheter and the ostium of the vessel. When the tip of the catheter is against aortic or coronary vessel wall, more seen in RCA. And when it is allowed to continue, it can lead on to ischemia and VT or VF. So ventricularization is when you have a wider pulse pressure. So when the catheter tip is advanced and ostial stenosis partially obstructing the flow, this is mostly seen in left systems, rather left coronaries than the right coronary. So here the pulse pressure is wide. When damping, the pulse pressure is low. This is how you differentiate. Now we will go to some of the waveforms. First is the atrial wave. Atrial wave, I said, we have 2 major waves per cardiac cycle. So how will you identify the waves? So that is it. So it is very simple. To make it very simple, P wave produces the atrial contraction. Atrial contraction is by the A wave. So naturally, the A wave will follow the P wave. So that is very, very important. And the C wave will follow the R wave. These are roughly. There will be some minor, because the atrium has to contract and produce the wave. So there will be some delay in occurring these things. T wave follows the T wave corresponds to the V wave. So this is how you should understand the when you are given a tracing. Most of the tracings I told you, you have an ECG. So this is the way you should identify the A, V, and C. Then you have the X and the Y distance. I am not going to those details. So now we have the RA pressure and the LA pressure. Normally, the RA has a larger A wave and the LA has a larger V wave, and the LA pressure is slightly more than the RA pressure. Why? Because of the LA pressure waves are slightly taller than the RA because left atrium has a chamber with a lower compliance. It's a lower compliance. Why the left atrium has a lower compliance? You can be asked. So what are the points? Slightly higher thickness of the LA. LA has a 3 millimeter thickness, RA has a 2 millimeter thickness. It is a less compliant chamber. And the right atrial volume is more, it can accommodate more volume without raising its pressure. And the left atrium is, you see the connections. Left atrium is decompressed by the relatively stiffer pulmonary veins which are fixed posteriorly compared to the vena cava. Vena cava are thinner structures. So naturally, because the connections are to stiffer structures, the LA is more stiffer. And the adjoining left ventricle, the LA is connected to left ventricle, which is much thicker compared to right atrium, which is connected to the RV, which is much thinner. So all these things lead on to the lower compliance of the left atrium, which leads to a taller waves in the left atrium, mostly the V wave. Now we'll go to some of the tracings. So this is one tracing. This is written as RA. So how will you interpret it? So RA, you can see clearly the I have taken a tracing which is a very prominent P wave. So this is a P wave. You can see the A wave. So which is this wave? It is already written. Some machines will give you the, but sometimes it may be wrong also. It may be wrongly labeled. So it has a very prominent A wave. So what is the scale here? This 0 to 50. So the A wave is around 30 millimeters. 30 millimeter A wave. V wave is around 20 millimeters. So the pressure, the mean is around 20. So it is a higher right atrial mean with a very large, tall A wave. Tall A wave. So then you will be asked what are the causes of a larger A wave, prominent A wave. It can be an AV valve obstruction, it can be tricus TS or MS, or it can be due to a decreased right ventricular compliance. Decreased right ventricular compliance, PS or PAH. Then you will be asked about the Cannon wave. What is a Cannon wave? Cannon wave occurs when the right atrium contracts on a closed tricuspid valve. Closed AV valve. The atrium contracts on a closed AV valve, you will get a Cannon wave. And it can be irregular or regular. You should know what are the causes of irregular Cannon waves. I think you should know. You will know these things. But just for ectopics, a complete heart block, VT, ventricular pacing are reasons for irregular Cannon waves. Regular Cannon waves, junctional rhythm, isorhythmic AV dissociation, etc. These things are usually asked. You should know. Now we will go to another atrial type of tracing. So this is actually a pulmonary capillary wedge tracing. So what are the waves? So you take one cardiac cycle and identify the. So this is the QRS. So here you have the P, because it is taken at a faster speed. You are not able to identify the P wave correctly, but you can see that there is a QRS, there is a P wave. So this is the, just after the P wave, you have the A wave. So corresponding to the QRS, you have the C wave, and you have the V wave, which is corresponding to the T wave. So here, what is the pressure? Pressure is high because the normal pulmonary capillary wedge, you know, here the mean is around 28. And the V wave is high, around 36. A wave is also around 32. So this is a higher pulmonary capillary wedge, or indicating of a higher left atrial pressures. Probably it could be mitral stenosis. This is another pressure tracing. You can see that this is again QRS. There's a P wave, so this is an A wave. This is a V wave. The A wave is more taller, 2 millimeters. Here the V wave is around 24, 26 millimeters. This also indicates a higher pulmonary capillary wedge pressure for different reasons that you should know. So the pulmonary capillary wedge, you should understand that it's an indirect measurement of So which is the most important pressure is the pulmonary, one of the most important pressures is the pulmonary capillary wedge or the left ventricular end diastolic pressure. These are the two most important pressures because you are getting the filling pressures of the left side. So indirect measurement of the LA pressure you are getting by the pulmonary capillary wedge. So there is a delay of 50 to 100 milliseconds with the LA because the waves have to take some time to travel to the capillary wedge position. So there is some delay. So you can correct that by shifting the peak of the V wave to the downslope of the LV pressure. So this is how you adjust. So in the most of the new cath lab systems, you can adjust, drag the waves, one wave over the other. So what you do is from the red arrow, you move it where the peak of the V wave cuts the descending limb of the LV trace. So how will you confirm? You entered the pulmonary capillary wedge position, but how will you confirm that? This is commonly asked. What are the five criteria to confirm pulmonary capillary wedge position? Usually, the pulmonary capillary mean is less than or equal to the diastolic PA pressure. That is one point. The tracing as a virtual, so you are going from the pulmonary artery tracing to the wedge position. So pulmonary artery is an arterial trace. It will have one wave per cardiac cycle. Now we are going to an area in the vascular system where there are two waves. So you will change from the arterial pressure waveform to the atrial pressure waveform. And fluoroscopy shows a stationary catheter after inflation if it is a balloon catheter. Free flow is present within the catheter. That is called flush test. And you can, if you aspirate and from the wedge position, you can get arterial blood. You can get arterial blood. So these are the 5 criteria to confirm the pulmonary capillary wedge position. This is another example of this is from the pullback from the pulmonary capillary wedge position to the pulmonary artery position to the MPA or the one of the branch pulmonary arteries. So what you can see is initially there are 2 waveforms indicating of the atrial pressure waveform. Pulmonary capillary wedge is also an atrial pressure tracing because it indicates indirectly the left atrial pressure. And once it is pulled back, it is in the arterial system which have a single wave per cardiac cycle. So here you can see 2 waves per cardiac cycle in the first part. You can see the A wave is around, I think A wave is around 30 or 26. V wave is around 40 or nearly 40. The pulmonary artery pressure is around 50 by around 34 or so. So here also the pulmonary capillary wedge is elevated. The pulmonary artery pressure is also elevated. We will discuss this tracing when we discuss pulmonary artery pressures and PAH that we will discuss subsequently. How to interpret what is the type of PAH, etc. Now we will go to the ventricular waveforms. Now we have seen the atrial waveforms RA, LA, and the pulmonary capillary wedge. We have discussed that. Now we will go to the ventricular waveforms. We have 2 types of ventricular waveforms, RV and the LV. How will you differentiate? How will you differentiate? When the triangular waveform, it is an RV. When it is a square, the top is relatively square, it is a LV percentage. To make it simple, you can also get a clue from the arterial pressure. The one which is corresponding to arterial pressure will be the left ventricle. And sometimes you can get a systemic RV pressure or a suprasystemic RV pressure also. That also you have to know the clinical background. So why the morphology of the RV is triangular? Because upstroke is not rapid because of the low dP by dt. There is no sustained peak and there is an air limit because it is due to the low dP by dt in the right ventricular trace. So what all things you should discuss in a ventricular pressure tracing? What you should discuss is, what you should discuss is the systolic pressure, the dip diastolic, and the end diastolic pressure. Among this, the most important, I should say, is the end diastolic pressure, which is very, very important. It's a crucial pressure. So where will you measure the LV, end diastolic pressure? That is commonly asked, and people make mistakes on that. It is measured at the C point. So how will you measure the C point? To make it very simple, you should drop a line from the R wave. The peak of the R wave, you drop a line perpendicular, and the point where it touches the LV pressure, that point is called a C point, and that is where you have to measure the end diastolic pressure. Measure the end diastolic pressure, LVEDP. Now you should know the normal LVEDP. I am not going to those details because you all know that. I am not going to those details. Now coming to the arterial waveforms. Arterial waveform, you should know the different type of waves. The dicrotic notch. This is the pulmonary artery and the aortic pressures. You can see that a single wave per cardiac cycle, it is not touching the baseline like the ventricular tracing. All these things you should know to differentiate the tracings. So this is the same patient. The pressure recorded from two areas. The first one, the white one, is recorded from the central aorta, from the ascending aorta. Same patient, it is recorded. The femoral artery is also being simultaneously recorded. You can see the difference. What happens is that what is happening? So what happens is that there is an increase in the systolic pressure. The dicrotic notch is being pushed down. That is what is happening due to the peripheral augmentation. That is called a peripheral augmentation. So what happens? These are the three tracings: A, B, and C. A is the ascending aorta, B is the femoral, and C is the dorsalis pes. I have given as an example like that. So what happens is that there is a delayed upstroke. You can see that the upstroke is getting delayed. There is also a delay, loss of amplitude, and absence of the dicrotic notch. You can see that the dicrotic notch is being from here to here to here. It is being pushed down. An increase in the systolic pressure and a decrease in the diastolic pressure. So this is due to the decrease in arterial compliance as you go down the vascular artery, and also the reflection and oscillation of the blood pressure waves. So this is the change which happens in the pressure waveform. This is what you see: the central aortic pressure, the ascending aortic pressure, and the distal pressure. You can see what all we have discussed: the rise in systolic pressure, the decrease in the diastolic pressure, the dicrotic notch is being pushed down. All these things are very clearly seen in this example. So now we will go to the second part of the talk for next 15 minutes or so. Some congenital heart disease we will discuss, tracings of congenital heart disease. So this is an example of a, so if this tracing is given, how will you discuss? So this pressure tracing, it is written as LV and aorta. It is written on the top. LV is yellow color and red is the aorta. So all those things are seen. So what is LV pressure? LV pressure is around 200. What is aortic pressure? Aortic pressure is just above 100. For example, we make it 110. So there is a gradient of around 90 millimeters between aorta and LV. So there is a LV outflow tract obstruction. LV outflow tract obstruction. So what are the two types of LV outflow tract obstruction? It can be fixed or dynamic. Fixed obstruction is a valvular aortic stenosis. Dynamic obstruction, the commonest is the hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. How will you differentiate the two? How will you differ? The differentiation is by the morphology of the aortic pressure tracing. So morphology of the aortic pressure tracing. So this is the first one. There is a rapid rise in the aortic pressure, a spike and dome-like pattern. So this is indicative of a dynamic LV outflow tract obstruction. You can see the rapid rise along with the LV pressure. Then there is a sudden drop and there is a sustained peak and then it comes down. But here you can see on the right hand side, what you see is a slow rising pressure, slow rising aortic pressure. So this is indicative of a fixed obstruction. This is indicative of a dynamic obstruction. Dynamic obstruction, both are differentiated by the aortic pressure wave morphology and the relation to the LV pressure. Okay. I hope you understood. We will discuss next session, probably we will discuss about this. This is another example. The patient has undergone a particular intervention in this patient. For example, this is the scale is the first tracing shot. The scale is around 400. So the scale is around 400. You can see the every division is 40. So the aortic pressure is around 260. LV pressure is around 260. Aortic pressure is around 20, 40, 80, around 100, 110 or so. So there is a around 120 millimeter difference between the two. And this is a slow rising aortic tracing. So this is an indicative of a aortic pressure tracing. Fixed aortic valve obstruction. So it's a fixed aortic stenosis. That is what we can say from this. Some intervention has been done in this patient. So here on the right side tracing, you can see that. Here you can see that here the scale is 200. Here it is 400. So always see the scale. So it can vary. So here there is a pullback tracing from the LV to the. Here it is a simultaneous tracing. Here it is a pullback tracing from the LV to aorta. So if it is the same patient, what all changes has happened? Is there a gradient between LV and aorta? There is a minimal gradient. And here the aortic pressure is around 120, 140, around 160, or 170. The aortic pressure is around 20, 40, around 10 or 20 millimeter gradient between the two. So the intervention has reduced the gradient between the LV and the aorta. So probably a balloon aortic valvotomy has been done. What other thing has happened? You can see the diastolic pressure. Here, what was the diastolic? The pulse pressure was not very wide. But here you can see that the pulse pressure is significantly wide. And the diastolic pressure has come down to around 60 or 65. So what has happened is that there is some amount of aortic regurgitation which has happened in this patient. So I hope you understood. From severe aortic stenosis, the gradient of around 140. After the procedure, it has come down to around 20 millimeters. Very successful aortic balloon valvotomy, but there is some increase in aortic regurgitation. So that is the tracing what it shows. So this we have already discussed the dynamic and the fixed obstruction. So this is another tracing. Again, in the aortic on the left side, this is a pullback done on the left side. So you can just think for a moment. What is this pullback tracing? So if you have somebody to discuss, it would have been better. I think we, as Mohit said, we will do it next time. This is a pullback from the proximal aorta to the distal aorta, or the ascending aorta to descending aorta. So what is seen? The ascending aortic pressure is around 110. The descending aortic pressure is around 80 to 90. So there is a 30 or a 30 millimeter gradient between the ascending aorta and the descending aorta. So what is it? It's an obstruction in the aorta between ascending and descending. The most commonest is a coarctation. Of aorta. This is another tracing which was done, I think, recently. So this is a simultaneous tracing and a pullback. Both are there. This is the aortic pressure which is going continuously. The femoral artery pressure actually. This is the femoral artery pressure which is running continuously. Then somebody is pulling a catheter from the ascending aorta to descending aorta. So what is happening here? The femoral artery pressure is around 200. The ascending aortic pressure is around 120. That's an 80 millimeter gradient. On pulling back, you can see that there is an increase in this is crossing that particular obstruction. This is again a coarctation where there is a significant pressure gradient between the ascending and the descending aorta. But there is a difference between this pressure and the femoral pressure. Because we have already said this catheter is just below the coarctation. This is in the femoral artery. So there is a peripheral augmentation. This is not a true gradient. This is a peripheral augmentation due to the distal femoral pressures. So this is a coarctation with a pullback from the ascending to the descending aorta, along with the simultaneous femoral arterial pressure shown in the blue color. This is another example. The same patient tracing pre-angioplasty and post-angioplasty. You can see that this is taken from a textbook. You can see that there is a significant gradient of around 90 and 60, 30, 40 millimeters. After the angioplasty, there is no significant gradient between the ascending and the descending aorta. So this is another thing in the aortic side itself. It's a pullback from the LV to proximal aorta to distal aorta. So what is it? You can think for a minute. So see the morphology of the proximal part and see the morphology of the distal part. What are the possibilities? The second part where there is a wide pulse pressure is not the ventricle because it is not touching the zero. So it is part of the great artery. So now you can get a clue on what is happening. So this is an example of there is no gradient between the LV and this part of the vascular system, but there is a significant gradient between this part of the great vessel and the later part of the great vessel. This is a pullback from the LV to the proximal ascending aorta to the distal ascending aorta.
And so sir, as you had very beautifully elucidated, you all must understand this tracing. As sir had very nicely said, look at the pressures in the down. There is systolic pressure remains absolutely perfect. So there is no gradient. And as you go up in the great artery, you suddenly see a dip. So that means there is something which is happening above. So you try to correlate his talk with his previous examples. The beauty of these examples is best understood if you are able to remember the principles that sir had earlier enumerated very beautifully. Great examples. Great.
Thank you, Mohit. Please contribute.
No, sir, we are enjoying. It was also because just to help the residents, to have this. This is a fantastic example.
Yeah, I think please contribute to every tracing so that it will help my job or ease my job also.
Sumodh is also there. Sumodh, if you can also...
yeah, please join. Yeah, Sumodh. Okay, so this is an example of what is it? Supravalvular aortic stenosis. Supravalvular aortic stenosis. Supravalvular aortic stenosis, you have a chamber above the aortic valve, but the obstruction is above that. So you will have a chamber, LV and the proximal aorta, there is no gradient. After that, there is a gradient. This is another example. So what is this also has three parts. The proximal part is a ventricular tracing. That you agree because it is touching the zero. And the pressure is around 150. So this is pulled back from the LV to the aorta, proximal aorta, or the ascending aorta, you can say. So what happens in the second part? There is a gradient between the distal part of the ventricle and the proximal part of the ventricle, because both are ventricular tracing. So it must be part of the ventricular system. But subsequently, there is no gradient. But there is no gradient between the distal part of the ventricle and the aorta. So there is something below the aortic valve which produces the obstruction. So this is an example of a subaortic obstruction. Mohit, any comments?
Perfect, sir. So again, you see how beautifully the diastolic pressure remains same. You are in the LV without show. So don't panic when you get a tracing. You just have to interpret how beautifully the tracing is absolutely same. The tracing is very clear, diastolic. Only systolic pressure is showing a gradient and it is happening below the aortic wall. And the moment you cross the aortic wall, there is no gradient. So it's all happening below the aortic wall. It has to be a sub-aortic stenosis. So the interpretation is very logical once you are able to have a deeper understanding of the basics, which were very beautifully again highlighted in the initial 20-30 slides.
Now we'll go to the right side and finish the thing. I think, yeah. Okay, now we'll go to the right ventricle. So again, similar tracing. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So this is again a pullback from the PA to the right ventricle. There is a difference between the pullback from the LV to the aorta. The LV, you will get always the LV as initially, and because we are going retrogradely. In RV to PA, we are going antigradally. That is the difference. So that always you should understand. So that also gives you a clue. When mostly it is from the pullback from the LV to the aorta, you can know that this is something on the left ventricular side. If it is the other way, you can see that it is on from the right side. So that also gives you a clue. So this is a pullback from the PA to the right ventricle. So what is shown? PA pressure. What is a PA pressure? PA pressure is around 20/10. Normal PA pressure, but there is an abrupt pressure gradient between the PA and the RV. So there is some obstruction at the RV outflow level. RV outflow level. So most likely at the valve. So I will show you some tracings and explain. So this is a valvular pulmonary stenosis with a gradient of around 90 or around 90 minus 20. So around 70 millimeter gradient. So this is 70 millimeter gradient pulmonary stenosis, valvular pulmonary stenosis. This is another example. You can see this is what I have shown. This is taken from a textbook. The other one is an original tracing. So PA to RV pullback. You can see the pulmonary artery pressure trace. This is the right ventricular pressure trace. Almost a similar tracing. So that is what this shows. There's a significant gradient. This is the systolic pulmonary artery pressure. This is the right ventricular pressure. Though this much gradient depending upon the scale. The scale is not shown here. It is written here. 24 and 101. So it is around 76 millimeter gradient. This is again a pullback from the main PA pulmonary artery distal to the main pulmonary artery proximal to the RV. Just remember what we discussed in the case of aorta. So we had the first two are arterial tracing. So there is something in the artery which produces an obstruction. But the proximal part of the artery and the ventricle are the same. So there is no obstruction at the valvular level, but there is some obstruction at the proximal pulmonary artery level. So what can it be? Proximal pulmonary artery, there is some obstruction. There is no obstruction at the valve because the main proximal pulmonary artery and the RV are the same. The gradient is at the proximal part of the main PA. Main PA distal has a low pressure gradient is around 20, 40, 20 and around 60, 70 millimeter gradient. So what is this? This is a supravalvular pulmonary stenosis. Supravalvular pulmonary, similar to what is a supravalvular aortic stenosis. This is another tracing. This is another tracing. Can somebody, it's okay, I will show you and discuss. So this is a pullback from the pulmonary artery going through the RVOT into the RV. So this is what is being shown. So this is the PA. This is PA because it is not touching the baseline. This is the RVOT because it's part of the ventricle but touching the zero. Here there is no gradient. There's no gradient between the pulmonary artery and the RVOT. That means that the valve there is no gradient. Valve there is no gradient. But there is a gradient between the RVOT and that mid RV. So there's a significant gradient. This is what you do a BPV. balloon pulmonary valve, whatever, you have a residual gradient. You don't know what to do. So what you do is you do a pullback and see where is the gradient. If you get a gradient like this, there is no obstruction still at the valve. There's no point in upsizing the balloon because the obstruction is at the subvalvular level. This is the infundibular PS. This is the infundibular PS. Okay, I hope you understood. This is the same as what we have seen in the aortic pressure tracing also. This is another tracing, RV, and this is some procedure has been done in this patient. This is the RV and PA. This is not a good tracing of some of our patients, but taken a photograph from the screen. So this is a RV and the PA pressure. But what is the difference between the other two? The here RV is almost behaving the same as the P. RV and PA behave. The PA behaves almost similar as RV. In what situation where you get a very low diastolic pressure in a pulmonary artery tracing? Very low diastolic pressure when there is a free PR. When there is a free PR. Like in a post-op tetralogy, we get a free PR, dilated RVOT, whatever blood goes in comes back. So there you will get an RV. There's some intervention has been done and the pressure has again becoming a pulmonary artery. So what is the intervention done? Could be a pulmonary valve implantation. Could be a pulmonary valve implantation. Okay, so now we'll go to Mohit. Shall we stop here and
No, sir, it's perfect. You can continue. Another thing is that if you want that, we can have this and we can have residents next time and the same tracings and hemodynamic interpretations can be shown to them. Whatever you are okay with, but your availability and that thing is very important. It is.
No, we can do. I think it is 1 hour. I think we should not teach more than 1 hour.
So I think so then it will be a great idea to have you with all the residents and make them interpret. So they're really enjoying. They're getting large number of comments, sir. Because the way this is the way they have to interpret in an exam, and each tracing becomes very easy for them. So
I think this will take time. This pulmonary artery. So I have some examples how to interpret and all.
Sumut, what do you say? Can we have another session on that, Sumut?
Yeah, we will have another session and we will include some other acquired heart disease also next time, and we will have a full session with the residents to discuss.
Sir, that will be great, sir. So what we do is, sir, we have a part 2 of the same hemodynamics. And we ask around about 5-10 residents also to join. So this thing can also be covered and some practical 5 or 10 examples, and we'll try to make them interpret, and that will actually complete. Samud, what do you say?
Yeah, we can do it on some other time. Yeah.
Yes, they need to get trained to interpret the traces more than spoon feeding. I think that they will know the common mistakes they can make and they can learn from that. Yeah.
Okay. Then we will do it sometime later.
So I think, Sumod, any comments, anything?
Yeah, it was a beautiful lecture. I think taken from very basics to common examples. It was very, very nicely taken, sir. So a few things are like, when we have been shown a ventricle and aortic trace, is there any way in which aortic stenosis versus coarctation can be differentiated? We dynamic versus fixed LVOT, we can based on the upslope we can easily diagnose. But coarctation, if in the femoral artery and in the LV, there are 2 catheters. So will it be possible to differentiate between, again, the delayed upstroke may not be there, like a AS. How can we differentiate?
Yeah, but the problem with the femoral artery is that you will get the augmented pressures. So the interpretation may not be that accurate. That is one problem. And in the coarctation, the diastolic pressure may be elevated because of the resetting of the baroreceptors. That also is an issue. So if you
yes.
Sumod, please go ahead.
Please, sir. Please.
No, if you have the students have asked some questions, now we can just send it to me. We can discuss it next time. So that
yes,
also can be done.
In the previous time, I think during the cath only was discussed. They used to say how to differentiate between when RV pressure when there is VST and index septum and all based on
that I had that index septum, that what is it, what is post-ectopic potentiation, all those things I will discuss next time.
Okay,
So
sir.
that is there. So in what all situations you will not get the RV morphology in that RV tracing. And that and all we will do. I had that. Then we will discuss it next.
Yes, sir. I think valvular versus infundibulum also some scoring may occur in the infundibulum traces.
Exactly.
Probably, you know, yeah, we can. Yes, sir. Sir, one thing, no, sir, you clearly shown that when we measure the central pressure versus peripheral pressure, there is so much of peripheral augmentation, so much of difference. But the studies that has, to document, especially with the AR peripheral signs, they're saying that the Hill sign is just an artifact. But in this, we can clearly show that there's a significant difference between the femoral and how come they document that it's an artifact?
Yeah, I think, So, sorry. So I have a tracing where there is a Hill sign which we have documented. I don't know whether it is there or not. There is actually when we pull back, when you do a pullback, no, you will have a, sorry, I didn't have that. When we have documented in some, I think the study was from India, no, which showed there was no actual pressure difference. So it was only an artifact. That is what is quoted. And but when we do pullback, you will see an increase in pressure difference. The augmentation of the pressure actually you see in aortic regurgitation patients in some of the cases we have done. So it is an artifact due to the whatever the peripheral waves are reflected. So the study is widely quoted. I think they have done some 50 cases. I think it is from GP Pant only, or?
No. It's not from GP Pant, sir.
I think it is a study from in India only. So.
Okay, so I think Sumut, it was I think a very basic and a good lecture for residents to start with, rather than giving them a high-five principles. And this gives you a very basic understanding. I would strongly advise you to read and again go through this particular webinar, read yourself, and start interpreting these traces. Probably you can even go through these traces again, which have been very nicely explained. And this will give you some confidence and very fine tune your approach to interpretation of these traces. And I think we will request, sir, when everybody is listening, that to please join us for another session to complete this hemodynamic session for all the residents. They have really liked it, and we can't thank you enough for being. We always feel that you are already a part of our own PG Track family, sir. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, thank you, Mohit, for inviting me and to giving an opportunity to interact with the students, and it's a wonderful.
Thank you so much, sir. And we will be waiting for your heart failure lecture also. This is something that which is
I think a lot of. So our next conference is coming, so I am organizing it. So much busy with this. So I had to take some time to prepare it. That is why this one I had actually. This lecture was with me. So,
if you could also say some words about your conference, that how it will be useful for our PGs, sir, that they will be able to join. So it will be a great idea because it's
I think it is a virtual conference on February 11, 12, and 13. There is a surgical session on 5 and 6. There are abstract sessions. And for the postgraduates, we are the Heart Failure Association also giving a best dissertation award of 1 lakh rupees to the best dissertation. So that also is there. And the best abstract also will get a prize of 50,000. And the second best will get a prize of 25,000. So please send the abstract. Something related to heart failure. Should be related to heart failure. So whatever you do, some heart failure will come. But it should be related to please, and I will share the.
Yes, sir. Please do us, sir. We will share it with all our groups, all the tracks. And I think you all should be looking forward for this particular conference. Sir is a great organizer. I have personally got a chance to be on his academic programs. They are terrific, great case discussions. I have still vivid memories of those case discussions, and they keep on happening. And I'll keep you informed. So it's all pure academics. And this is the beauty of all of us, that, academics and virtual world has reunited us into a very big family. So it's not whose program and who is doing it. No, it's all for benefit. And let me tell you, as you guys are learning, even myself, my colleague, Dr. Sumut, Girish, Dr. Niti, everybody is learning because each one comes up with great ideas and and this is a great mutual learning. So this is how academic grows, and this is how science grows. And this is what our approach should be, rather than, who is doing is not important, but what is happening in academics is what is most important. That is what has been the principle of my life.
And one more thing, Mohit, we do heart failure clinics every second Saturday of every month. So it will be the presentation will be from one of the institutes.
Yes,
and the student panel will be from another institute. I think Mohit was a part of that. I think Sumod also we will invite you to the next program. Initially it starts with a lecture of 15 minutes. Then there will be a case presentation. Then there will be take-home points on that case. And then finally half an hour will be asked the examiners. You can send those questions and the examiners will interpret. I think it is a very good feedback for that program. Every second Saturday, we will inform you. I think most of you will be receiving the.
We'll wait, sir, and we'll be happy to share with all this. So I think thank you so much, sir, for this great session, and thank you so much. Always you are like always there with us on this journey, and thank you all residents for joining. I'll be sharing this slides, this lecture soon on the YouTube. You can again listen to them. If you have any questions, comments, please talk to us. If any of the residents are missing out on this sessions, even the MD residents, please write to me. We'll be able to give you the link, and it can spread and can join. Everybody is free to join this particular webinar. Thank you, Intas, for providing us this platform. Next week, we'll again be joining, probably if sir is available, with the same part 2 or with another lecture. And have a safe weekend. Stay safe and have fun, academics and personal life. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.